Cam Rising was hurt in Utah's game against Baylor. Happened over 24 hours ago. I'm still completely crushed by it. And this Utah team is going to be drastically different without Cam Rising, whether it's this week, maybe not at all. We don't know. But just like the Utah team is preparing for life without Cam Rising, we also have to do that. So we'll talk about the significance of if Cam is or is not in based on what the film has shown us. We also have to discuss what Utah's offense looked like with Isaac Wilson now this last week, as we've had the chance to break it down on film against Baylor. And Big 12 is kind of crazy right now. We'll talk about that all on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcasts. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. We greatly appreciate you making us your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. You can go to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5 with 5 and then ourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Austin Eames. And Austin, we got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about what we saw from Isaac Wilson's performance in a moment, talk about a little bit on the Utah defense too, because they were fantastic. All the crazy results that played out in the Big 12. Utah's new conference is proving to be just about as wild as the Pac-12 was in many retrospects. Pac-12, by the way, doing pretty well this year. I saw, I think Pac-12 teams have only lost 2 games so far. So, what could have been? But still, I mean, I'm enjoying Utah's new conference. Just still, obviously, hate how everything played out. But let's talk about Cam. As I said in my open, it's been over 24 hours since it happened, but I still sit here so devastated because in that first quarter, we saw what this offense could be. We saw what this team could be because the defense was absolutely suffocating Baylor at negative yardage for most of the first quarter. And then you look at what this offense was. They scored 2 touchdowns, could have had even more if not for like just a small, like Dorian Singer and Cam just barely not connecting on that play. So it's massive that Cam could potentially be missing time because we saw last year how drastically different the offense is without him. We saw signs of that in this game when Isaac Wilson stepped in, and Utah offense without Cam Rising is not a world that any of us want to live in again.
Yeah, JT, it's scary. I mean, we were also excited coming into the season. Obviously, the offense last year without Cam Rising wasn't anything to write home about. And we got through the offseason, and we got to the game against Southern Utah, and we got to see what Cam did, throwing 5 touchdowns in the first half. I mean, you could not be more excited. And then, he goes down with the injury. And, I mean, it completely changed the entire vibe around the team and the fans. I mean, you could hear the stadium go silent as soon as he went down. So it's definitely nerve-wracking. Obviously, Wilson is making steps in the right direction, but the offense looks completely different when Cam's on the field, like you said. I mean, 23 points in that first quarter, had a little bit of trouble in the second, but I mean, we want Cam to play a full game. It's been 2, and obviously for different reasons he hasn't played a full game, but Utah's going to need him back, hopefully for Utah State, but definitely for Oklahoma State in a couple weeks here. But yeah, it's a good sign that Coach Witt and everybody around the team has said the injury's not serious, but it's an injury to his throwing hand. So that's definitely not something you want to see.
No, it's absolutely. And Coach, I love Kyle Whittingham. He's done unparalleled things for the University of Utah. He is a fantastic coach. When it comes to injuries, he cannot be trusted at all. What he did to all of us last year, something I understand, but was still frustrated by, just as a fan who wants to know, and as someone who covers his team, wanting to know if Cam Rising plays. It's just we can't trust him that he had held on to the information that Cam was out for the season for so long last year that we're not going to know. And now I do not think Cam Rising's out for the season. Kyle Whittingham has always been quick to divulge when season injuries pop up, right? He's not someone who'd be like, oh, puts that off. So maybe for a few weeks with Cam, he did last year, but I don't know if he knew how bad it really was with Cam, is because Utah would have been more aggressive in the transfer portal last year, I think, for quarterbacks, had they thought, just like with this year, as we're kind of seeing that play out. It's just hard to recruit a guy to be a backup when Cam Rising is going to be your starter. So for this Utah team, it's such a devastating thing. And it's hard because we won't really know about Cam until He's probably even like taken the field a couple days before. I don't know how it's going to work with Kyle. I really don't, because I do not expect, we're going to hear from him at tomorrow's press conference. I do not expect him to share much information on Cam's injury. I expect him to play his cards close to the vest. I've said it on my show yesterday. I don't think we're going to see him against Utah State, even if he's fine. I just feel like, why would you risk him getting hurt when you absolutely need him for the Oklahoma State game? So I just think it's a very much if everyone wants information, they want to know this is Utah football. They're not going to let anything really leak. And I don't think, unless it's a positive, which we already saw, like Porter Larson report out, like you said, that the x-ray on his right hand came back negative, but we're not going to know what his status is until probably like a few hours before game day at best, because we'll see him out there if he's dressed or not.
Yeah, that's usually how it works out. I remember waiting last season in the stands and looking at the tunnel and waiting to see if Cam Rising was dressed. Obviously, as you said, it was week to week. We didn't know for the longest time, and you would see he wasn't dressed and just, not again. But I do think that Utah could live without Cam Rising next week.
Absolutely.
Against Utah State. Obviously, that team lost 48-0 against USC. Crazy things can happen, but I don't see Utah State as a huge threat. I think Isaac, with a week of preparation, which he hasn't gotten to start in these last couple of games, I think with a week of preparation, he could move the offense and get Utah the win against Utah State. But I agree. I think Utah really needs Cam to be healthy for their game in Stillwater. I mean, that's a game with huge conference implications. That's a game with huge playoff implications. That is a game Utah needs to win. So I wouldn't be mad if the team rested him against Utah State if it meant that they can get him fully healthy for that game against Oklahoma State.
One thing to note, too, for Utah as well, if they don't have Cam, we'll talk about this more at the end. Based on what I've seen from the Big 12, if Cam was out for the year, Utah would not be picked to go to the Big 12 championship game. Am I going to say there's no way that Utah makes a Big 12 championship game without Cam Rising? I'm not going to, because of number one, like, look at this conference. Like, we're still waiting to see who the great, like, elite teams are that are going to rise up and break through. There is no Ohio State. There is no Georgia in this conference. So, and Utah also has a very favorable schedule. So if you're telling me Utah finishes with only 2 losses in Big 12 play, and maybe even 3, we've seen 3 loss teams make conference championship games before in conference. This Utah team will still have a chance to be in that game because of how good they are at home because of this schedule too. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think to completely write this team off, if Cam Rising were for some reason to miss like a month of the season and like Utah suffers multiple losses, I just don't think is accurate. Because once again, we've seen whether it's the Pac or the Pac-12, Big 12, all of them have a history of multi-loss teams making conference championship games.
Yeah, I liked what you said. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in this Big 12, but like you said, there's not a lot of teams that have stood out as being that best team in the conference, bar none. I mean, we might talk about it a little bit later. A lot of teams had really hard weeks. Had a really hard
against
week.
Not good opponents. Some of them too. Cough, cough. Kansas State.
Yes, I mean it means something when you look at the Big 12 and you're like, maybe Iowa State had the best week in the conference.
And the week before, Iowa State barely squeezed out their game against what I believe was an FCS opponent, if I'm remembering correctly, who they played.
Yeah, so obviously Colorado got destroyed. Houston almost beat Oklahoma. I mean, anything could happen in this conference. So I think you're right when you say a 3-loss team could make the conference championship, and that hopefully isn't Utah. Hopefully Cam comes back and Utah goes to win them all, but it's not the end of the world if Cam Rising has to miss a couple games.
It's not. And once again, people will take what I said out of context right there, and they'll say I'm picking Utah without Cam Rising to go to the Big 12 championship game. I wouldn't do that. If Cam doesn't play, I would predict that Utah wouldn't make it. But if you're telling me they're in it, I'm once again not falling out of my chair because of this schedule, because of this conference and the lack of impressive teams compared to like a juggernaut. I'll say that. There's some solid teams. Oklahoma State, I think Kansas State, they found ways to win. Good teams find ways to win. Those schools were able to do that. And obviously no Cam Rising. Oklahoma State should beat Utah. But this Utah team is too talented, especially on the defensive side of the ball too, even if they lose Cam, to go out with a complete whimper. Once again, they were 8-4 last season with all of those losses coming to top 20 teams. And then, because at the time, even Oregon State, when they played them at Oregon State, was a top 20 team too, and Arizona was coming up in the rankings. So
Yeah.
I do think that this is a Utah team still capable of things, but that only is if Isaac Wilson is able to step up a little bit more. So let's break down the Utah backup quarterback situation, Isaac Wilson's play. That is what we have to be discussing in one moment. But first, want to take a moment to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you're having a long list of things you have to do at work or a list of do-it-yourself projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can get back and check everything off your list. If you are like me, you always have a large list of projects for home when you get your supplies for the project. You do not want to forget those essentials that you need, so you want to be at your best and have 5 Hour Energy so you can make sure to pick up everything that you're hoping to grab. 5 Hour Energy is a brand for hardworking people like yourself, and you guys have trusted 5 Hour Energy for over 20 years to give you the alert, energized feeling that you need to get through a busy and hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots. They're right at the cash register at nearly every convenience drug and grocery store nationwide. You can stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy products today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That is all caps, no spaces, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th. On one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. You can go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, Austin, keeping it rolling. Let's talk about Isaac Wilson. So we both watched the game live. Now we've gone back and watched the tape over too. What I'll say about Isaac Wilson, I think that Utah can once again still win games with Isaac Wilson, because here's what I see with Isaac Wilson. I see a quarterback who is still getting just those reps and learning live in the game. Isaac still is getting comfortable facing pressure. That's something that was evident to me a few times. There were multiple times where, okay, I wanted him to move over. When he gets pressured, he wants to take off and run. He just wants to scramble and get away from it rather than move over in the pocket, climb the pocket. He doesn't like to stay in the pocket when some pressure comes in. And pressure isn't just like a free rusher. Pressure can be defensive lineman driving a Utah offensive lineman into his lap. Whenever pressure comes in, Isaac just doesn't like that. And I wish, and there were times, I will say, the throw to Money Parks, each game he's shown the throw to Caleb Lohner, right? In the first game, he's had moments where he's shown good accuracy, and there's been times where he's been protected and shown good accuracy. There's been times he's been protected and hasn't. Been time under pressure where he's made a throw or two, but it hasn't come frequently enough. Also still locking on to reads, needs to go through his progressions a little bit more, even when he's not pressured. I think he is a young quarterback, but through both games, I have seen growth in spots, and I don't feel like we should feel like the sky is falling when Isaac Wilson takes the field, because also he spends all week getting the backup reps, and Utah builds a game plan to maximize Cam Rising. When Utah builds a game to maximize their quarterback, we saw Bryson Barnes win at Washington State. We saw Bryson Barnes last year nearly beat Washington, one of the best teams in college football. So I think if Isaac Wilson was to get the start this week with a full week of preparation, continuing to improve on some of the things that we've seen out of him, I think Utah's offense will still be able to do positive things. Take a step back for sure, but I'm just not going to sit here and say that, if Isaac Wilson starts against Oklahoma State, that Utah is only going to score 10 points that game. I just don't see that being the case.
Yeah, it's obviously the difference between Isaac and Cam is apparent, but you have to remember that Cam has spent 4 years in this offense. Isaac has spent 9 months in this offense, learning this offense, this Andy Ludwig offense that is not for the faint of heart. I might say it's a hard offense to learn. And I think we saw that in the second half of the game, especially Utah was running a more vanilla offense. They weren't able to do the trick plays like they were in the first half. They just had to rely on the run and to Isaac for Isaac to make some basic reads. But I think what I've seen from Isaac that is great to see is he's improved from his first game at Southern Utah. I mean, we saw him throw that pick that you're like, where were you going with the ball, Isaac? And he didn't do that this game. He protected the ball. Didn't turn the ball over once. And I think that's a great thing to see from a young quarterback who's still a teenager. I mean, I think it's a really good sign to see that, one, Isaac is growing. He had didn't have any turnovers this week. I think he's making the right reads. Like you said, I think he missed a couple during the game, maybe overthrew some receivers at certain points, but that's to be expected from a guy that's a true freshman. I mean, not to say that he can't run this offense. I think there's a reason he's the backup quarterback. It's because the team and the coaching staff feels that he is capable of running this offense, but he's been thrown into some unfavorable positions, I might add. I mean, he goes from not thinking he's going to get into the game to getting thrust into the game in a moment's notice. And I mean, he's showed poise in those moments, but I imagine that would be nerve-wracking for any backup quarterback, especially one in his first collegiate season.
The case. And once again, we're not saying that Isaac Wilson is amazing and he didn't play bad. No, he had bad moments, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the other thing. Utah not scoring with Isaac Wilson in is a little misleading because Cole Becker missed multiple field goals. Yes, I would like Utah to keep those drive going in a few spots too, but that's where if Becker hits those field goals, we're not having this conversation. Isaac also, like, let's look at some of the positive things he did. He comes in for Cam when it was because of Cam getting hit with the intentional grounding. It was a massive loss of yardage, and he's able to get the chains moved for Utah because he throws it up to Dorian Singer. Might have been a catch. We don't know how the play would have played out because Singer got grabbed. So drew a defensive pass interference. Also, why did that drive end up stalling and Utah to settle for a field goal? Well, Micah Pittman was running a slant route, was open over the middle of the field. I think there's a pretty good chance that throw would have been completed, but Tongai gets driven back into Isaac's lap, and the defensive end throws his hands up and blocks the pass. So, and then there's other drives like we talked about where, hey, he needs to stay in the pocket a little longer, just move around the pocket rather than take off and run. He needs to see the field and make other reads. But there are moments like the pass to Money Parks and several other times where you're like, okay, he did step up and do the right thing here. Just like I always said last year. There were times last year where Bryson Barnes was never the reason Utah won. He never put the team on his back. But what happens when you have your backup quarterback go in is the other pieces need to start executing better. So Utah needs to be running the ball better. They did that sometimes. They didn't sometimes. Absolutely loved the final drive of the game that Utah had, where they bludgeoned Baylor on the ground in the run game. That's where we saw this offensive line come together and really start moving dudes. That's where I was really encouraged by that. But there were also several drives where Utah gets drive killers and penalties. Jaron Kump had a couple. Tongai had some. And there's just still missed blocks that happen as well, too, where if Isaac Wilson comes in, yes, the box is going to be loaded a little bit more. Utah needs to be able to run the ball for 3 and 4 yards. And sometimes they were, and then other times they got blown up, and then you're putting your team back in 2nd and long, too. And Utah needs to have their players continue to win on the outside as well, too. So to once again summarize what we're saying, Isaac needs to continue to be better, but he's doing right. He's doing some good things. And also the reason Utah didn't score points yesterday in the second half wasn't just on Isaac. It was on Cole Becker missing some field goals too. It was on this Utah offensive line, whether it's in pass protection, because Isaac also got sacked one time. There was a poor twist. The offensive line, this has been an issue for a little bit for this group last year too. And twists are hard to pick up, right? That's something I'm not saying it's easy to, but like there's a lot of time where Utah doesn't always get beat one-on-one. It's on a twist that they give up a sack because it is hard to pass that off too. So we're just saying other pieces need to step up as well. And Utah fans shouldn't feel like, oh my gosh, we're not going to win. We're not going to win anything with Isaac Wilson at the helm too, because I do think has some positive things going for him when you turn on the tape.
Yeah, I mean, Isaac did everything. He's since he's gotten to the program, he's done everything he's been asked to do and more. I mean, a true freshman playing in his first 2 games, that's relatively unheard of. And to not have any turnovers in this game against Baylor, I mean, Baylor wanted that win. You could tell in the second half that they were moving with a sense of urgency. And for Isaac to do what he had to do and get Utah the win is a big deal, and it's going to be big for his confidence. I also think he was missing a dimension of his game that, if added, could completely change the Isaac Wilson we see take the field, potentially against Utah State. And I mean, as he didn't scramble. This is a guy that had 3 touchdowns and almost 200 yards rushing in his state championship last year in Rice-Eccles Stadium. And we haven't really got to see that from him yet. So I hope that, well, for one, I hope that Cam is healthy and can come back. But if Isaac does start this game against Utah State, I hope the coaches just give him free rein to turn it loose, because that's a guy that is dangerous when he uses his legs.
Yeah, his pocket presence needs to continue to improve. But like we talked about, there's a lot of aspects where, hey, he grew from game 1 to game 2. We're still waiting to see him evolve on some of those other things, but I still feel good about Utah obviously winning at against Iowa State too, but I was going to say against Utah State and a lot of the other games. Yes, the Oklahoma State game, Utah's probably not winning that, but to act like Utah has no shot with Isaac Wilson, that they're going to get the doors blown off if they go down to Stillwater, when a mid to bottom SEC team in Arkansas nearly walked in their house and beat them. I don't think that's true. And a large part of the reason I think that is because of the Utah defense and also the state of the Big 12. Those are two things that we are going to be diving into in one moment. But first, want to take an opportunity to tell you all about one of the sponsors of our episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at Ibotta. Are you still thinking about taking that dream vacation? Yes, summer's in the past now, but you still might be eyeing that luxurious trip to catch some summer weather. That's why you have to check out Ibotta, because with Ibotta, you get cash back on all your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is great because it's a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn hundreds on items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. Right now, Ibotta is offering Locked On Utes listeners just $5 for trying Ibotta by using their code Locked On College. That's Locked On College, all caps, no spaces, when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use Locked On College. Once again, all caps, no spaces. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code Locked On College today. All right, Austin, back with me here. We'll talk about the state of the Big 12 in a moment, but Austin, I don't know about you, but just going back and rewatching this game, I just come away more and more impressed with the defense every time I turn it on. The defensive line was dominant against the run. The coverage was outstanding. The Utah's speed was off the charts. The pass rush was elite. I just think I said it on my show yesterday, I think Utah's defense is the best overall unit in the Big 12, offensive or defensive, and I absolutely stick by that after turning on the tape.
Yeah, I mean, I loved everything I saw from the defense. They did it all. The D line was amazing. The safeties, I mean, we can talk about the safeties were amazing. Teo Johnson, Nate Ritchie, they did an amazing job. They led the team in tackles. Obviously, the duo of Connor O'Toole and Van Fillinger. I mean, I think there were question marks coming into the season if the loss of Jonah Ellis would be felt on this defense. And Jonah Ellis is really talented. And I mean, Connor O'Toole and Van Fillinger and Spencer Fano are doing work. And I mean, they are a wrecking crew. The Baylor quarterback, DeQuan Finn, I mean, he looked like he was seeing ghosts. Yeah, I mean, he was getting pressured on almost every snap. Obviously, the interior D-line as well is helped a lot with that. But yeah, I was really impressed with everything I saw from the defense. I mean, to hold a Baylor team to under 200 yards of offense is exactly what you want to see when there are question marks surrounding your offense.
No, absolutely, I agree. So impressed by this Utah defense. And hey, first Big 12 win of the season, even if it doesn't count at all towards conference play. Speaking of the Big 12, just absolutely insane, the state of this conference right now. You mentioned the games briefly, Austin, but let's run through a couple of them. BYU, shout out the Cougars. I'll give them credit where it's due. I mean, hey, you beat SMU on the road. I didn't think they were going to do that. So shout out to them, beating SMU 18-15. SMU is a lot of people's ACC sleeper. I obviously don't think that's going to end up coming to fruition, but hey, gutsy win, and things didn't always go to plan in that game for BYU, but all that matters is you found a way to win. So I'll give them credit there. So BYU proving that they can be a team that can knock some teams off potentially, right? How about Arizona? Let's talk about the best teams in this conference. Arizona nearly lost to Northern Arizona. I mean, shout out Northern Lumberjacks. My brother plays basketball there, but not exactly a football powerhouse. So this is where I have a lot of concern still about this team with the losses they had last year. Houston almost beat Oklahoma. So now I'm like, wait, is that? And I still think that's more of an Oklahoma issue than anything else, because I'm still waiting on Brett Venables' program to really turn the corner. Arkansas nearly beat Oklahoma State. That game needed overtime. I think Arkansas is solid, but the fact that this Oklahoma State team that's top 16 had a middle to bottom tier SEC team come in and do what they did speaks volumes. Tulane nearly beat Kansas State, and Kansas straight up lost to Illinois, as well as you had Iowa State beating Iowa. But Kansas was a lot of people's dark horse pick, and they also lost to a lower level Big Ten team. This conference is absolute insanity. So don't tell me once again that Utah with Isaac Wilson has zero shot of making the conference championship game and even potentially winning it, when literally we see all of this crazy. And of course, we expect Cam to be back and this not to be a thing. But yet again, I just want to say, to act like Utah with Isaac Wilson would be completely finished in the Big 12 race based on the insanity that's playing out in this conference. The fact that Northern Arizona, once again, almost beat Arizona should tell us everything we need to know right now. This conference is still absolutely wide open, and we're still learning a lot about which of these teams is actually going to be for real.
Yeah, it's funny that Utah comes from the Pac-12, which was one of the most volatile conferences last year. Teams beating each other left and right. And now you get into this Big 12 where, as you said earlier, it's hard to pin who's – even if there is any juggernaut in this conference. It seems like there are a bunch of teams that can compete for a conference title. So, yeah, I mean, God forbid Cam's out for a long time, but Utah, no matter who's at the helm, can compete in this conference, and I'm excited to see them do that. You said it, Arizona didn't have the best game against Northern Arizona. I mean, this is an offense that looked insane last week, and this week struggled against NAU. Obviously, Oklahoma State, double overtime victory over Arkansas. Shout out Jaquindon Jackson. I mean, What a performance. I was really hoping that he would take out Oklahoma State for us. But, I mean, Iowa State gets a win against ranked Iowa. Anything can happen. So it's been really fun to watch. I can't wait to see Utah take on Oklahoma State in that first Big 12 game. It's going to be really exciting, but it's going to be a hard one. I mean, Stillwater's a very hard place to play. So I want to see Utah out there in full force. I want to see them fully healthy with Cam Rising. I want to see a battle of two of these top Big 12 teams, but I guess we'll just have to see week by week what happens.
We are. It's going to be fun to watch it play out. Austin, always fun having you on. Appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, GT.
On tomorrow's Locked On Utes, be reacting to Kyle Whittingham's comments, the latest from Utah's media availability. What are we going to learn about Cam Rising's health? What does the team think of Isaac Wilson? Hint, they're all going to speak very glowingly about him because that's what these teammates tend to do, but still worth noting and talking about. So we're breaking that down, as well as start to talk about Utah State. Bryson Barnes didn't get it done against USC this year, but he did last year, and it's still a fun, intriguing matchup that Utah is taking on Utah State. That'll be coming up on tomorrow's show. If you're in the market for a second listen, Locked On College Football is there for you. Spencer McLaughlin takes you around all of the biggest stories in the sport. I mean, we got Oregon once again having to squeeze out a game against Boise State, who are the best teams in the Big Ten, the SEC, all that and more on Locked On College Football. Thank you again, though, for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. That'll do it for us today, but we hope to see you tomorrow.